Hello everyone, welcome back to the next episode of the Road to Be the Master series. This is the episode number 93, in which I will cover the round 3 from the 5th Rigo Janos Memorial Round Robin Tournament. Let's see how it went. As you may remember from the first video, expected result for this game was not to lose, and a win would be nice. I got paired with white pieces against the best player in the field, which was the international master rated over 2400, the only player in our group to have such a high rating. However, I had a feeling that in here I might fight for a full point, because why would he go for a draw against me, right? He's much higher rated, and I was willing to go into an open fight with hopefully good preparation. If you remember from the last video, in the round number 1 I got surprised because I was preparing mostly for Sicilians and I was met with e4, e5. And in here, in the round number 3, I was also expecting Sicilians, so the work that I did for the round number 1 hopefully would not go to a bliss and I would not forget it, but rather use it in this very game. And it's kind of what happened, because indeed we got the Sicilian defense, so a fight it is. I went for the open Sicilian, obviously, because I want to fight, and I was met with the, let's say, classical variation. In here, over the years, I had many ideas, then many difficulties, and objectively speaking, I was not getting the best possible positions out of the opening. That's why I worked on it a lot for this specific tournament. And on top of that, funnily enough, just a month before it, I was on a trip as a coach on the tournament for the Polish First League for the junior players. And in here, I also prepared a variation at that point, which was obviously to start with the Bishop g5 Rouser variation. And in here, mostly black goes for e6. And that's exactly what my opponent mostly went for. However, 1.5 months before this tournament, he played also Bishop d7 line, kind of an enigmatic one, not so popular, but once I knew that he plays it, I was very well prepared. I knew all the moves until very late moment, so stay tuned for the big preparation from myself. The point of this move is to obviously develop the piece, but also make space for the rook, and overall to continue the play on the queen side at first, not committing to anything on the king side from my opponent's perspective. I, on the other hand, do the stuff that I would normally do, doesn't matter what black does, because I usually play queen d2, I usually castle, and then obviously once the knight is taken I have to take it back, and once queen a5 is played, f4 also would be the move that I would be having my eyes on. So that's usual stuff, let's say. In here, h6 was the choice of my opponent, which is, let's say, growing in popularity. After this move, I took on f6, and we have pretty imbalanced position where opponent just got himself a bishop pair, but he is lacking development and have some worse pawn structure. Still in here, I was in my preparation. I played king to b1, prophylactic usual move, queen c5, suggesting a trade which I don't want to do. With the black king in the center, obviously I just drop back to d3. And now the most common line, I believe, is the one with immediate f5, if I'm not mistaken. But my opponent went for the h5, then followed up by f5. The whole point is that black wants to make his pawn structure better. He wants to open up the corridors, the diagonals for his pieces, mostly the dark squared bishop. In here, e5 is believed to be the most commonly played, if I remember. However, I prepared another move. Firstly, as I've said, for my student during the tournament when I was the coach, and then I followed it up with further analysis for my own sake for this tournament, which was rook h2 e1. It was the move that did not come from the, let's say, grandmaster games. It did not come from the let's say, engine suggestion. It came from the, common sense that I had. So as a coach, when I was preparing the junior players, I also wanted to include some good looking, healthy moves, not just to rely on the engine nodes and lines. And that's why I suggested, why don't you just, put the rook onto the center file with the king being there. So that's how I, let's say, checked out this not yet novelty, because there were some games in it, but rather a rare move. And the idea was that once the bishop is committing himself to g7 and actually putting some pressure to the knight, now I can play e5 blocking this bishop, and obviously this pawn cannot be taken because of the pressure toward another bishop. And in here, usually what happened was the move bishop e6. However, my junior player was met with novelty rook h6, and the novelty that was not, humanly obvious, that was not played at that time yet, but it was the top engine suggestion that we just omitted. So when preparing for this game, I knew what people are normally playing and I had something against it, and I even was prepared against novelty, which is not something that you do that often. In this game, however, my opponent went for bishop e6 move. The idea of it is obviously to make the positioning of the bishop better and to allow to take on e5 because the bishop is gone from the weak position. In here, I obviously take on d6 to not lose the pawn, and after e d6 I basically have the decision to make. And in here I would like to touch on very important topic if you want to progress, if you want to be a very, very good player, because it doesn't matter whether you are on the Lichess, whether you are on chess.com sites, and the built-in engines in here suggest the move knight b5. And when I was on the trip and I had no access to my better, let's say, offline engine, indeed this was my first suggestion to my junior player when preparing the variation. But once we played it out, once we, played few moves further, we realized that engine, first of all, is not keeping all this advantage. With more time, with more moves being played, he's kind of making it look like it was not that good of a decision to go for knight b5. And on top of that, it was quite hard to continue, like humanly speaking, to find all those moves. And to my surprise, when I, as I've said, checked the line, this exact position with my stronger engine, queen b5 was the standout option. It was not by far better than knight b5, but it was simply better. And it's important to have this perspective. It's important to work on the best tools possible, because if I would rely only on chess.com or Lichess engines, I would have played perhaps a worse move. Thankfully, I did the job, I did the work, as I've said before tournament. I had this access, I had this opportunity, and I realized I knew that queen b5 is better. When you are on chess.com, at least for my, let's say, sake, the engine shows that queen b5 should be around plus 0.5, knight b5, knight b5 plus 0.5, queen b5 check plus 0.3. When you are on Lichess, when I were on Lichess, the difference was even bigger. However, queen b5 is indeed the better move out of the two, and that's what I chose. I know it's a pretty long topic that I've touched on, but I hope that at least for some of you it might be helpful. As you can tell, also I was blitzing out the moves, as did my opponent, but I assume that already at that point his preparation kind of has been coming to an end, because after king e7 move that he played, he offered me a draw. But I knew that it's not only about the computer evaluation, it's not about the preparation, it's also about the practicality of the position that you get. And I was more than keen on to continue playing because I knew that it is a very solid endgame for me that will just occur in a second, and I have simply no ways to lose. So why don't give myself a chance to win, right? So this draw offer meant nothing to me. I knew immediately that I would not be going for it. Maybe my opponent was kind of hoping that when refusing the draw, I would go for a witch hunt, for a pawn, taking the pawn, attacking the king and whatnot, but that's exactly what opponent wants, because then he play rook c7, he has the possibility of taking here, he might have the possibility to bring on the other rook onto the attack, and all of a sudden this king is weaker than that one. But I knew all of that. I knew that I just simply can take the queen on c5, give a check to the king that has to go away, play c3 to take away an additional square for the bishop in the center of the board, play bishop c4, solidifying the knight, and this is where my preparation has not ended yet, because I knew that my opponent is supposed to find crazy move bishop f6, and maybe I kind of forgot to add a human touch to my preparation, because this move maybe did not even cross my opponent's mind, because in isolation this move simply hangs the bishop. So in order to find this move, you would have to evaluate this position as a practically bad one for black, and the one that needs very, very, very precise play. And bishop f6, even though it looks bad because it gives up the bishop, obviously then the bishop is taken. It seems like, you know, with knight being there, with those rooks being there, that black is not that great. However, if I even go for this initiative, black has an amazing resource to try to kick away the knight, then, you know, exchange one pair of the rooks, then bring this rook into the game like that. So really, really not that easy, especially if you don't know the variation. So maybe that's why I should include other moves into my preparation, but I didn't. But once bishop h6 was played, I knew that it's not a good move because it only attacks the pawn once. I can simply protect it, and after takes, rook g8 felt like yet another inaccuracy to me because I knew that in the bishop f6 variations, this is not as good as it sounds. And once I do not take the bishop but rather play some move, let's say in the this type of scenario where I want to keep as much control over the light squares as possible, my opponent can play like this. And only then when there will be the time for it, let's say I would play g3, takes, so the bishop is much better than in the game, and the rook would be much better than in the game. Once such position occurred with bishop hitting nowhere, with the rook not being on the open file but also attacking simply once to the pawn, I knew that out of the opening I got objectively better position, practically better position, much more time on the clock. It all comes down to the facts, to the ability to, you know, win a better position. And let's see how it went. Obviously, to begin with, I protected the pawn. Rook d8 happened, putting some pressure towards the knight and the pieces behind it, with maybe some idea of trying to um, overload my bishop. So I played a4, solidifying the square. My opponent opted for b6, which might make sense. At some point in the game, I might have gone for a5, trying to disrupt this pawn chain. Therefore, my opponent does not allow it. And if you look at my pieces, they are all great. They are all you know, connected to each other, but I have still few more moves to make, which may make my position even better with my king. There are scenarios where those bishops would be exchanged across this diagonal, those rooks across this file. So how am I going to win the game then with so little pieces? Well, with the activity. And funnily enough, I have quite a nice path for my king to take all of those pawns, and I kind of knew it because I knew that out of preparation, not only I had the variations in mind, but also the ideas. That's why I opted for the king c2, king b3 continuation. Rook d7 was an okay move to make, trying to take away the square from the knight. One more, let's say, thing I wanted to touch on was a question that might have, you know, raised in your mind, because after takes, we have opposite colored bishops, right? And usually it means, well, it's a drawing position, right? Because how can you win this? For example, as I've said, if such move would happen, I can play even like that. And after this, let's say, move like this, I might even think at some point about playing king b5, then bishop c4. So for example, here, and usually it means a draw, but thanks to the fact that I cover this square, this square, this square, this square, and this pawn is standing here, bishop is not able to attack this pawn, right? Just no entry whatsoever. So my pawns are safe. If they are safe, first advantage that I have is that those pawns are not safe from the attack of my bishop. Second thing is that, thanks to the control over the very same squares, it's nearly impossible for the bishop to protect those pawns. And I can just try to take them one by one. So that's what I meant when I've said that this opposite colored bishops would not be equal, because I have a great one and this is the very, very bad one. For those reasons, as I've said, black just played rook d7, controlling the square, not pushing anything yet. And after rook e to d3, I am in a position where I have probably the best placed positions, the best placed pieces that as I can have. So maybe it will be now the time to make a move, to make a statement and to continue pushing forward. Black, I mean, he kind of also is on the best squares possible, if you may say so, when having such a discoordinated position. However, well, he has to make a move, right? So let's look at the pieces one by one. This rook has just moved here. So like it stands here to protect the entry point for the knight. So the best position and not too much sense to make the move with the rook. So okay. Bishop, literally nowhere to go. We discussed this exchange, no chance, no way of this happening, working and being good. So can't work, can't work. This rook is kind of okay. It hits the pawn and also it protects another entry point for my knight. Cannot move anywhere. So the only pieces that you have is the king and the bishop. The bishop has only one square and the question is, like, why would he want to go there? We don't know. So what you are left with? The king. And the king itself does not have too many options. Well, like left or right, what for, we don't know, right? And so on. So all of a sudden, it's not yet a Zugzwang, but it's practically speaking, humanly speaking, a very tough position to make any move that will make your position better or at least not worse. That's the point. So as you can tell, in the meantime, I gave away all the time advantage that I had because I wanted to include in my thought process the best continuations for the opponent, and I knew that the best move would be to play bishop g7. I just knew it. It makes no sense to put the bishop there. It does not help the bishop itself that much. Funnily enough, computer just suggests to go back here and there to change absolutely nothing in the position and give me the decision of how do I want to push it, how do I want to win the game, if that's even a possibility, because objectively speaking, I'm not winning yet. My opponent, however, went for something that looks like a human decision, but it's simply an inaccuracy that pushes my position over the edge. I can now realistically push for a win. What was the move? King to g7. Why is it a blunder? Because it allows me to execute my strategical dreams scenarios with some tactical resources. What is it? I can now play with my knight, because if you think about it, if it was my move to make, I cannot go here, here, all the squares are protected, pawn is protected, here I can't, there is my pawn, and on e3, if I went there, I am closing down the connection along the third rank, so my pawn might be hanging. With the king on g7, I can play knight e3 because of the very easy trick, rook g3, knight f5 with the fork, but most importantly, obviously, the attack, discovered attack. And the point also is that after bishop f5, in some scenarios, I would lose the rook, but obviously, as of now, I am attacking the king, so I will be the one with the material advantage and a one position. For those reasons, once king g7 happened, once I was able to play knight e3, as I've said, I am able to execute those exchanges, which favors me a lot because it leaves the opponent with this terrible, terrible bishop on h6. My opponent exchanged only once on d3. I still obviously have an eye on this g3 pawn, and now in the variation bishop c4, I would just take with the king, taking the pawn and basically winning the position. So technically speaking, it's not even that hard to win from this point. Therefore, my opponent went back with the bishop to c8, but it cannot be the sign of a better position, right? So rook d8 was the move I've played. The idea is obviously to attack the bishop, to harass the bishop, and opponent does not have a tactical resource like this because I have knight f1, hitting the rook, hitting the bishop, and my knight is protected, so I am winning a piece. For that reason, bishop should be protected. If it went to b7, I can take the pawn, I can play like this, so the only square available would be to go to e6, but then I got what I wanted, right, basically speaking. Yet again, then same trick, then reroute of my knight here, or maybe my king there. Once more, technically easily winning position. So my opponent went for rook c6. Once again, sorry for not removing the question mark. It's not that bad of a move. In fact, I nearly fell for a trap because it seems like rook has very little space in here to protect the bishop, so that I should be able to play bishop b5 followed up by knight d5 and basically claiming that I am winning the material easily. But after bishop e6, there is the pin and I'm not winning the material easily. Still, I should be maintaining some advantage, but I don't have to go into such stuff. So what do? I play prophylactically. I play calmly. I know that I am crushing my opponent, just don't make a mistake, and my move was king c2. I very much like such moves because they tell you that you have full control over the position, you are fully aware of what might go wrong, if anything, right? And now I'm threatening with this and that, really making this life along the c-file miserable for the opponent. That's why he chose a6 to cover the square, but now I am switching the idea because there is this saying in chess that in order to win the game, it's needed for you to claim more than one weakness in the opponent's camp, and he has plenty. He has weak pawn here, weak pawn there, weak bishop, attacked bishop, misplaced rook, all the basically problems in the world. And on top of that, bishop d3 seems like not the most accurate move, but I had, let's say, some tactical trick in there too. Imagining that the opponent play, let's say, rook c7, trying to, maintain the tension along the c-file, I can now even take on c8, here, knight f5. There is the fork, so if the king goes far away, I can just simply take the bishop and claim big advantage, and if it's glued to the defense, let's say, of the bishop, now I can do this nasty discovery and win the material too. So bishop d3 is not as innocent as it looks. c4 was played for that reason, I guess, to not allow me to take on c8. But now I have the decision. Should I take here, here, or there? Maybe even that works. So plenty of moves that are winning the material. I decided, maybe counterintuitively, to take on f5 first because I wanted to make use of this strange setup of opponent's pieces there. Idea being that obviously if he takes, king g6 is met with fork, and king h7 is met with rook d6 with the double attack to the bishop, forcing my opponent to trade. So I took a pawn, I will be taking the other pawn, and with so little pieces on the board, it's more than enough to win easily. That's why after bishop takes f5, my opponent played bishop e6, and once more, I've calculated many things, and I took on e6. Simply, if the rook takes, I claim the other pawn. If the pawn takes, few more tricks, I played knight g4, after which my opponent resigned because I am hitting the bishop, I'm threatening with a check, and once more, if the king goes down, I take the bishop for free. If the king goes up to protect the bishop, it goes onto the wrong square, I can deliver the fork to the rook and to the king. Obviously, there might be some ways to protect from both, let's say, threats, from the fork, from the threat of losing the bishop, but then probably I would just simply start taking all the pawns because they are all weak. So my opponent had enough, he resigned in this very moment, and what can I tell you guys? I bring down the best player of the tournament, international master rated over 2400, so not that long ago I won my first game ever against international master during the classical game, and it was with black pieces. Now I add a win with white pieces to it, so I guess the task of winning against international masters is completed. I felt over the moon, especially since this was the morning round of the game, of the day, sorry, and the next round was supposed to come in the afternoon. Once more with white pieces. Amazing feeling to play a double round with the same color, especially if it's white. And I won against the best player. In the next round, I was supposed to play the worst player, at least according to the rating list. So my hopes were high, and if you will join me for the next episode, you will know if they were also realized. So this is it, one of my nicest wins in a while, so I'm happy with it. The preparation worked, the game was amazing, and yeah, that's that. I hope you liked it. If you did, please remember to leave a like and visit me next day to find out how did the round number 4 went. As of now, thank you very much for watching. We'll see each other. Bye bye.